That which we don't understand, we are frightened of, we label, we reject, and then when that is happening within you, we struggle and our mental health deteriorates, and then of course we get accused of being mad, and we are different. Our ideas are different. We are struggling. To be different can be multifaceted. Perhaps we don't want change, perhaps we do. It is the same response. When we are not along with the mainstream and our security is under threat, we feel vulnerable. So we do not lose heart. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day, and that takes courage. Samuel demonstrated courage. He resisted change, and yet it happened, and he gave the change his blessing. In the end, change is something we can't resist, but it frightens us and frightens others. But this isn't a sermon about change, for I fervently believe that we must be the change we want to see. Rather, it is about the fact that Jesus is accused of going out of his mind. I quote, "He has gone out of his mind." So let us look at the mind. Aristotle believed that courage was the most important quality. The cowardly lion who followed the yellow brick road found the courage within him, for it is within us. More specifically, it is in the subgenus anterior cingulate cortex. Therefore, it is possible for us to train our minds to face adversity with courage. Much like we train our bodies to compete at sport, we train our minds to solve crosswords, so we can with courage. When this is perfected with evidence-based neurological research, the world of treating anxiety disorders will be changed forever. It is not just about facing fear, it is about living with risk and uncertainty. We, like so many, have lived with risk and uncertainty for some months, years. As Ernest Hemingway put it, courage is grace under pressure, and we can adapt ourselves. Unfortunately, our understanding of religion and the religious language and symbols that we use can quite often contradiction our ability to train our minds. Firstly, we must be vulnerable. Bent Brown has found that belief in our own unworthiness ensures that we live in fear-based lives, and the liturgies that we use today are full of sentences like "we are not worthy to receive" or the confession. Actually, God created us to be who we are and loves us for who we are, and we have an incarnational theology, which means we believe God values and loves us. By doing the "I am unworthy," we bow our heads in self-protection instead of being vulnerable and saying to ourselves, what is the worst that can happen? Brown says courage and vulnerability are closely aligned, and having both increases the quality of our lives. That means we must dare to fail, because actually, what are we afraid of? Secondly, therefore, we have to acknowledge our fears. That means being honest with ourselves and understanding what we are afraid of. Only then can we be courageous. But being a member of the church can often mean we are afraid to be honest. Honesty begets judgment, and although Jesus said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone," judgment is an unhealthy disease that pervades the church. Jesus preached forgiveness, that he came for sinners, and yet... And of course, therefore, we have to ensure that we have the opportunity to conquer our fears by exposing ourselves to them. For instance, if we fear failing at a job interview, the only way to conquer that fear is to go for a job interview. And when we fail, we realise that it isn't as bad as we feared, and therefore we will have the courage to do it again. Failure is not something that our religion would embrace. In the works of Endo, he writes of the most despicable men who sin again and again and again, and yet demonstrates that God's love is for them, and more so for them. And fourthly, if we think positively, one day we may well get that job. Certainly, that we all know that thinking negatively can often mean we fulfill our thoughts. Therefore, there are sports psychologists the world over making a living out of training their sports clients to visualize winning. We need to visualize what we need, what we want, what we can attain. By visualizing what we can achieve and then acting on it will conquer our fears and anxiety. And yet our religion can confuse that thinking positively negates the grace of God. So how do we reconcile the scientific evidence-based research of psychologists with our religion, or at least what we seem to allow predominate in our religion? This isn't the age of enlightenment, when religion is seen as either an ethical framework or superstitious nonsense on the one hand, or the ultimate word of God on the other. We believe that in all things, science and religion, we can encounter God, and it is in those encounters we try to provide for all, and in those encounters open ourselves to God's love and grace. We therefore have to reconcile these seemingly mutually exclusive positions. So let's look at the story of Jesus and the demoniac. The demoniac's first words to Jesus, other than recognizing who he was, are, "Do not torment me." Basically, leave me alone. I'm afraid for the future to risk any change. The townsfolk came out to see what happened and saw the change in the demoniac, and then they were afraid. Change, fear of the unknown. And then that fear spread. And the ex-demoniac wanted to stay with Jesus because anything else was fearful and would have caused great anxiety. Essentially, he would have replaced one crutch for another. But Jesus sent him away to find the courage to face his fears by ensuring the ex-demoniac was exposed to those fears. Fear pervades this story, which led me to thinking about the sermon. But God is recognized in not only the compassion, for Jesus did not run from or condemn, but treated the demoniac like a person. But also God was recognized in the challenge to conquer the legion of fears which assailed him. God, throughout the Bible, from Abraham to Jonah to Jesus and Paul, inspires humanity to take some responsibility. Jesus said, "Sin no more," to the threatened woman. He said, "Sell all you have to the rich man." Jesus saw in the excuse me. Jesus saw in the demoniac the vulnerability, but did not say, "You are unworthy." He said, "What is your name? Who are you?" And we are called to be honest and say, "This is me, God." And just as Jesus released the man from his demons, and our honesty releases us. We are no longer afraid, and we then allow the grace of God to work within us. It isn't about God's grace or our humanity. It is about both. If our humanity wasn't important and it was purely God's grace, then we wouldn't need a theology of the incarnation that said God dwells within us. If it was just God's grace, then it could be zapped down from above. Rather, it is God's grace for our humanity that means we should have the courage and not be afraid, and respond to Jesus' challenge to the ex-demoniac to return home and declare how much God has done. For the ex-demoniac, who had legions of demons leave him, was more grateful than those who had just had one. For as in many of Jesus' parables that pervade through the works of Endo, the more we are forgiven, the greater our faith. Our faith teaches us to be vulnerable, honest, and acknowledge our fears, releases us from them, and it teaches us that we cannot hide from them behind Jesus. But actually, the very same Jesus sent people like us away to conquer those fears. What Jesus taught does not contradict modern science. Rather, it gives a narrative to new discoveries of the subgenus Anterior cingulate cortex.